Yes, my dear friends, this is the third part of the videos about the 100 questions Gemini has defined for me to answer. So they are all connected with my research and creativity. Question number 26. If the Purkinje cell has 80,000 linkages, why does the mind feel full at 10? Oh, okay. So the implication, it seems, that when the Purkinje cell, a critical unique kind of cell in the brain, which has 80,000 linkages, unlike other cells which may have, I think, much lesser number of linkages, including certain neurons which has only one linkage. When that is the case with the processing center, brain is the data processing center, the CPU of the human design and setting. When the brain has cells which can have 80,000 kind of linkages, then why the mind feel full at 10? So 10 here implies 10 linkages, yes. That is, the mind can feel full or reaching its limit while considering even 10 linkages. When human entity is the most powerful of all the organisms, it is such a great wonder of huge brain which can reflect upon the entire universe, according to Patanjali Yoga, why the normal mind is able to consider only a maximum of 10 linkages at a time. The answer is there in a different way. Perhaps I think the mind is able to manage even 10 because of the large database of the large process of 80,000 linkages of Purkinje cell or other brain cells. So the mind is at limitation because mind is the development inside the human entity by the design and setting and process of the brain. In general, there is a tendency to consider mind as the, whatever phenomenon centered in the brain region. But to my understanding, mind is spread all over the body till the tip of the skin. Rather, mind is nothing but an energy field, or mind is a phenomenon rendered by the massive energy field of the countless cellular energy processes. But at the same time, the normal human mind or consciousness is much limited. I would say the reality of the great rishis who could see the entire universe. There are references to the entire universe reflected in a single drop of water. The great ancient Bharat rishis like Dhanvantari and Susruta and Charaka, I used to wonder how could they identify the properties and the characteristics and potentials of countless things in the planet Earth. The great field of Ayurveda, which is about treatment of almost all the kind of illnesses, when I go through that, I wonder how could Dhanvantari or Charaka sitting in their ashrams identify the properties, etc., of the leaves and the roots and the barks and the wood and all those things of a tree and of the plants and all those things. Point number one. Point number two, how could they identify certain extract of the leaves of the tree, then the roots of another plant, then the seeds of another plant, and how it is to be combined and in what proportion. Certain things are to be powdered, certain things are to be made into kashayam or liquid, and then in a certain composition again it is recombined in order to be given to a patient suffering from a serious body process problem. How could they ever, like in the modern experiments that can be comfortably managed in a laboratory setting with measured chemicals and so on and so forth, how can a human being identify from out of this innumerable range of varieties of plants and trees and etc. and their properties? How it is possible? my understanding is that their mind could engage with every plant, every leaf, every item in the universe, and that items sort of talk to them. They could easily feel their properties. Somewhat like a butterfly could identify the flower. How could they? So similar original function of the brain was available for those kind of human beings. It is told that, for example, the great Indian astronomer Bhaskara could identify the precise movement and location and degrees, etc., of the various celestial bodies, the various planets in the solar system. That when some very advanced radar was designed by maybe NASA or some such institution in the US, they identified that a certain star in the distance, which was considered to be one, is actually not one but two. And that was already written here by Bhaskara. They could see so many linkages at the same time. Talk about that. There are much great wonders about the human mind of the past. But at least for the modern human beings, the mind is so much limited in consideration of the variables. Perceivably, a so-called mind of a creative individual could consider many more variables at the same time. Same time meaning in short durations. In great fiction, like Dawn Flows Quiet. So how could the author of Dawn Flows Quiet, how could he maintain the differential characteristics and personalities and behaviors and events and contexts and so on of that many characters in the mind and relate to them, and then finally wrote that magnificent work? Similarly, film directors, how many things they consider. So why does the mind feel full at tennis? Because that's the way the mind has been trained from childhood onwards. The little child, as it was developing, it was sensitive to almost everything in the surrounding, which anybody knows who are familiar with the child. But gradually his attention is sort of directed, captured, or forcibly invited to little things around, and by which the mind is so-called focused. And gradually, sitting in the classroom, focusing attention to whatever the teacher talks, gradually the mind is trained to be comfortable, to be, I would say, to be conditioned with the minimum number of things. That is one way to look at it. At the same time, there is the other thing. The mind getting sharpened to focus on only one thing. Okay? In the methodologies and the perspectives and the literature about so-called meditation or incubation for the consciousness to identify that singular operating vital principle, the attendant spirit of the human being, a disciple is to sit down and focus on a single spot or a single piece of flame in front of him, flame of the lamp in front of him. And at that time, he or she realizes that the mind just cannot do that. Maximum 3 seconds, then again the mind wanders to something else. The eyes are looking at the single spot on the wall or the paper, but the mind is wandering here and there. So both are there. It is not able to focus on or maintain focus on one thing, or the so-called stream of consciousness. It will not allow the attention to keep just on one thing. That is on one side. And on the other side, it is focusing on several things, but perhaps not more than 10. I have never come across this kind of concept that mind focus on mind can have linkages to 10. But if this question is considered, that is the answer. Perhaps even that focus on 10 is possible because so much of power is available. Okay. If the linkages of the brain cells were less than that, much less, perhaps even that would not have been there. This is the way I look at these things. In other words, at the essential level, when the human entity has such a magnificent range of powers, in the sense that a single human being can have all the different powers of all the human beings on earth, in principle, because every human being has more or less the same kind of brain and other physiological structures. That's enough. Question number 27. What is a ghost linkage? Ghost, yeah, which is not there but which is really seen, sensed by certain people. What is a ghost linkage? Something that feels real but has no substance, but has no so-called objective reality. Yeah, in clinical psychology, such a situation is called hallucination. That is sensory, direct sensory, firm, convincing feeling of seeing another person or an object or a setting and so on and so forth. Hallucination. Somewhat the sensory aspect exclusively. And the mind also has that another problem called illusion, a firm belief about something which does not exist. So that is called illusion. So that is also a linkage possible by the so-called mind. It is definitely processed by that ever-perpetuating mind process of the body. Because by all sensory data, for example, a visual hallucination, there is visual hallucination, auditory hallucination, that is of sound, then touch. There could be an hallucination of taste also at deeper levels of schizophrenia or other serious mental illnesses. What is a ghost linkage? So that is a linkage definitely driven by the energy field of the mind. A linkage which connects to something that is not existing. Normal linkages, for example, when you look at a pen on your table, that eye is able to see the pen on the table. And when the same eye see a pen on the table which is not there, then that is an organic problem. Definitely there is some kind of an anomalous process in the visual cortex with visual hallucination. Visual cortex or the occipital cortex in the backside of the brain, there is some cortical problem, chemical processing problem. And at a normal level, it never happens, but it can happen for getting completely intoxicated by alcohol at a minimum level, and if that person uses the so-called psychotropic drugs like weeds or LSD is very well known for that. I don't know what other drugs are anyway. Then again, because the chemical substances in those things would stimulate certain parts of the visual cortex, and then they see, and the motor cortex, then they feel actual physical touch, or they hear sounds, and mental patients often they talk to people, they talk to entities, and they get the answers back. They would report a complete series of dialogues with such hallucinated entities. That's there. So it's all created by the, I would say, the wonder of the brain. For example, Alan Watts, the genius who lived in China and researched into the great philosophy of Tao, in his book Tao, the Watercourse, I suppose, at the end of the book, he is actually describing in a way, very positively about the mysteriously magical effects of LSD. And he went on to suggest that brilliant people, competent people, powerful people, or people having willpower and mental control should take LSD, should benefit from LSD. Because the range of possibilities of hallucination is so remarkably, unexpectedly varying. That's what I understand. I never had luck, I would say, to get a drop of LSD. Anyway, but I understand what can happen. There's no point, even if you see entire planets before your eyes and you enjoy, you see that. You after all see that. When you understand your essence, nothing in the world is a wonder or a mystery. Even if you make intergalactic travel, after all it is the you who sends it. So similarly, yeah, but at a conscious level, the experience of such ghost linkages could provide a beautiful, enjoyable experience. Like somebody should see films, or somebody listens to music and dance and the painting and go to see seeing the sights of the one world. That is for that operating central thing, the so-called I in the individual can experience whatever the consciousness is deriving out of such exposures. So, ghost linkages, it is the work of the brain, it is the wonder of the brain also. For example, if somebody can consciously access that level of process of the brain, then what a great blessing. Perhaps the Dhanvantari or the ancient rishis must have been capable of doing that. Otherwise, they could not do what they did. But this question has implications at different levels, in the sense that ghost linkage, that means linkage that enables the perception of something which has no substance. And when there is no substance, what enables the entity to feel it as so-called real? Question number one. Question number two, who or what, not who, but exactly what in the entity feels it as real? The sense organ was sort of triggered to derive or define or create certain object or certain person. Mental patients, so-called schizophrenic patients, see a person, let us say so. A person, the details of whom can be clearly described by the patient. What color of dress he or she was wearing, how he or she looked like, what was the background, what that person said. Okay, to that details. So-called substance-wise, so-called objective reality or the thing outside is not there. Then what inside the human entity is concluding it as real? What are the linkages of deciding that it is real? So there are so many questions. They are all about the ultimate wonder of the human being. When I interviewed people in Uttarkashi and other mysterious areas of Himalayas, they have a great lot of stories of direct interaction with the so-called deities. Okay. If you read the book the Tao of Physics, written by a great particle physicist by the name Fritjof Capra, I think the very second page there is a description. One day, as I remember, one day he was lying down on the shore of an ocean somewhere in California, I suppose somewhere in that region, and by a split of or whatever I call the slip of moments, he could see the entire universe as a dance of Shiva. He is a Westerner, and of course he is a particle physicist who is like other particle physicists, who is convinced that the entire universe is nothing but a vast, super vast ocean of particles, and everything is made of composition of particles. And at that level of clear particle physicist, lying down and looking up, he see the dance of Shiva. So Shiva is a very popular, very well-known deity of the Hindus of India. The figure of Shiva is very well known. Shiva is attributed to be a great dancer. The dance of Shiva, which is called in Sanskrit language Tandavam. It was not normal dance. It was an eccentric dance, I would say. And Shiva is often personified in a human format. So when he said that, when he was written that the universe is a dance of Shiva, was it a language, or was it a reporting of what he experienced? And if he experienced whatever he experienced, how could he linkage it with Shiva? So what is Shiva? Was it a vision or reality? 28. How does linkage analysis differ from systems thinking? Okay. Linkage analysis is a method of creative analytical thinking developed by me sometime some 20-30 years back, using which I trained a few of my participants in creative analytic thinking. So according to that framework, entire universe is nothing but a huge assemblage of linkages. At a simple level, let us say every written word is a linkage of alphabets. The word universe, U-N-I-V-E-R-S-E, it's a linkage of that alphabets in written form or in printed format. But when you talk, again it is a linkaging of sounds, linkaging of certain sounds, which is named Tamil, linkaging of certain sounds, which is named as Sanskrit, and so on and so forth. So that is in essence linkage analysis. My concept of linkage analysis. All these questions are derived basically from 3 documents I had submitted to Gemini for some other purpose. They have derived some 100 questions, which is not at all an easy task, which only Gemini can do, because Gemini comprises the intelligence of millions of other people. So how does it differ from systems thinking? I do not know precisely what is systems thinking. It is systems thinking. Definitely a system is much larger, and for my perception, a system would involve hundreds of or thousands of linkages. When I am looking at linkage at the root level, I was not bothered about systems thinking. So how exactly linkage analysis differs from systems thinking, I cannot say anything now. But I have a feeling that linkage analysis is much sharper and much larger in details. Linkage analysis would enable or direct somebody's attention to the minutest possible details of a thing under observation. Like an organization is a system. System is large. Linkage is at the particle level of the large area of system. Now, that's enough. Question number 29. What is the speed of a linkage? Is it faster than light? I would say that's a kind of a very average kind of a question, because light is an objective reality. Linkage, it is something that is perceived or sensed or created or imagined or visualized by the creative human being or even normal human being. Everybody sees linkages of many things. So you can look at a mountain and linkage with that. You can look at a deity in the temple and linkage with that. That is by that attention and your energy and consciousness of focusing on that. Whereas light is a so-called reality, and there is a lot of physics about light. And I think Albert Einstein or somebody calculated the speed of light, which is a definite number. So it could be definitely enormous kind of speed which a human normal mind cannot engage with. The speed of linkage. In that sense, people say human thinking is much more faster. That is an illusory perception. For example, someone is sitting here with a cup of tea in the hand, suddenly the next thought is satellites orbiting Jupiter. So what is the physical distance? Even the so-called light beam may take some time and some more time. But a human being sitting on the sofa before a cup of tea would immediately think about satellite, then come back to a train newly introduced in the locality, and so on and so forth. They are all concepts. It is not that there is a speed of linkage in a practical sense, and thereby the person is traveling from the cup of tea to the satellite. If that is considered as speed, for example, if it is juxtaposed as speed or the speed of light, then the so-called thought of human being is super speed than that of light. But that is very, very metaphorical only, which is not correct. The question whether light is faster than the speed of linkage is, I would say, it's an irrelevant question. Now, question number 30. Can a linkage be deleted or only modified